Hi there, I'm Eleanor from the KU Natural History Museum, and this is Pop-Up Science Online. Today we'll be talking about radioactivity and how geologists and paleontologists use radioactive decay to infer the age of some rocks and fossils. I'll show you how to use a Geiger counter, which is a scientific instrument that measures radiation, and I'll also demonstrate a fun activity you can try at home to model radioactive decay using Twizzlers or other types of licorice. For step-by-step instructions for today's activity, head to our Museum from Home webpage and click on the Pop-Up Science tab, where you'll find a downloadable PDF with all the instructions. You've probably heard the term radioactive before. It often brings to mind characters from movies and TV shows that go from average, ordinary beings to large and super-powered beings like the Hulk or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those characters are imaginary creations of the people who wrote and illustrated the comic books and the movies, but in the real world, there are many things all around us that are radioactive. Radiation is energy moving in the form of particles or waves. There are many different types of radiation. In Storybook Science later this month with Colleen and the Public Education Student Assistants, you'll learn about the discoverer of radiation, Marie Curie, and you'll also explore one particular form of radiation called electromagnetic radiation. Today, with me, for Pop-Up Science, you'll learn about another form of radiation called particle radiation, which is what geologists and paleontologists use to understand geologic time. Before we dive into particle radiation and radioactive decay, let's discuss some fundamental chemistry concepts first. As you likely know, all objects, organisms, and anything that has mass and takes up space is made of matter. Remember that matter can be liquid, solid, or gas. All matter is made up of substances called elements, which have specific chemical and physical properties. And elements are comprised of atoms, the smallest unit of matter. Atoms are made up of particles called protons, which carry a positive electrical charge, neutrons, which carry no electrical charge, and electrons, which carry a negative electrical charge. The protons and neutrons cluster together in the center of the atom, called the nucleus, and the electrons orbit around the nucleus. We categorize elements based on their atomic number, which is the number of protons found in the nucleus of every atom in a particular element. For example, if an atom has only one proton, we know that it's a hydrogen atom. If an atom has 6 protons, we know it is a carbon atom. The number of protons, which is referred to as the atomic number, uniquely identifies a chemical element. However, the number of neutrons in an atom can vary. Forms of the same atom that differ only in their number of neutrons are called isotopes. Many elements, such as carbon, potassium, and uranium, have multiple naturally occurring isotopes. That's why you'll hear scientists talk about common isotopes such as carbon-12, carbon-13, and carbon-14. All versions of carbon have 6 protons, but the version with 6 neutrons is carbon-12. 6 protons plus 6 neutrons equals 12. The version with 7 neutrons is carbon-13, because 6 protons plus 7 neutrons equals 13. And the version with 8 neutrons is carbon-14. Some isotopes of elements are stable, while others are unstable. Over time, the unstable isotopes change or decay to reach a more stable atomic configuration. They do this by releasing subatomic particles and energy. This is particle radiation, and the process of changing from unstable to stable is called radioactive decay. Scientists use an instrument called a Geiger counter to measure particle radiation. This instrument consists of a Geiger-Müller tube, which is the sensor that detects the radiation, and then the processing electronics, which display the result. This instrument is used widely across a variety of science fields, and it helps people to identify objects emitting potentially harmful levels of radiation. So let's try it out. So first we'll turn it on. You do that just by pressing the button. And then what we'll do is we're going to align the Geiger-Müller tube such that it can pick up radiation of some of these items. So this is an antique teacup. Let's see if it picks up any radiation with it. Well, we saw a couple of pops there. Maybe a little bit of radiation. about this antique green glass. Not really getting anything on that. Over here, we have a banana, which they release a little bit of radiation since they're full of potassium, but very small amounts. Nothing that would hurt you anyway. Let's try out against this cell phone. Oh, we're getting a little pop. So this is how you use a Geiger counter. And you can see that nothing that I have measured here today is really giving me anything significant in terms of radiation. And so that's good because that means that the items in my home are not producing any radiation to the levels that would be harmful to me. Now, let's get back to radioactive decay. Radioactive decay can cause the identity of the isotope to change. For example, the unstable isotope carbon-14 always decays and eventually becomes the stable isotope nitrogen-14. Unstable radioactive atoms are known as parent atoms, and the stable isotopes they decay into are known as daughter atoms. The decay happens at a predictable rate specific to each isotope. The time it takes for half of the original parent atoms to decay into stable daughter atoms is the half-life. Now, how does all of this relate to rocks and fossils? Well, geologists and paleontologists use two techniques to determine the age of rocks and any fossils the rocks may contain. These techniques are relative dating and radiometric dating. Relative dating is used to determine the order of a sequence of events, such as which sedimentary rock layer within a stratigraphic column was deposited first. That is, when one event happened relative to another. Radiometric dating uses the predictable rate of radioactive decay of certain elements in some minerals to figure out the actual time that an event occurred. That is, the number of years ago. Therefore, radiometric dating can be used to estimate how long ago rocks formed and, when coupled with relative dating, to infer the ages of fossils contained within those rocks. Radiometric dating is most reliable for igneous rocks and volcanic ash layers because the minerals in igneous rocks and volcanic ash haven't changed due to erosion and reworking, which is what happens to mineral grains in sedimentary rocks, or from pressure and heat, which is what happens to mineral grains in metamorphic rocks. Remember the rock cycle? When hot molten rock, like lava or magma, cools down to form igneous rock, different minerals crystallize. The minerals that crystallize are made up of various elements, and some of those elements are composed of naturally occurring radioactive atoms, like we discussed earlier. By measuring the quantity of unstable parent atoms left in the rock and then comparing it to the quantity of stable daughter atoms in the rock, then scientists can estimate the amount of time that has passed since that rock formed. For example, zircon mineral crystals in igneous rocks frequently contain radioactive uranium-238, which decays to become lead-206 over a half-life of 4.5 billion years. In order to estimate an age for a fossil, scientists usually look for layers of igneous rock or volcanic ash above and below the fossil. By dating these surrounding layers, they can figure out the youngest age and the oldest age that the fossil might be. And this is known as bracketing the age of the sedimentary layer in which the fossils occur. To model radioactive decay and the concept of half-life, let's do a quick activity. Grab 2 Twizzlers, red vines, or other types of licorice candy, a pencil, and this graph paper from the Activity PDF. On the graph paper, you'll label the vertical axis as amount of licorice, and you'll label the horizontal axis the half-life. Number the horizontal axis from 1 to 10. Then place 1 piece of licorice on the vertical axis. This is the original amount of supposedly radioactive material. Break the second piece of licorice in half. Place 1/2 on your graph at the 1 mark on your horizontal axis. Then break the remaining half in half again. Place 1 piece at number 2 on the horizontal axis. Continue this process until the remaining piece is too small to break in half. On your graph, make a small pencil mark at the top of each piece of licorice. Remove the licorice and then draw a smooth line through your marks. What you've created is called an exponential decay curve. The licorice represents a radioactive material, such as uranium-238, which is a parent atom, and after each half-life cycle, or time, half of the radioactive parent atoms decay to become stable, non-radioactive daughter atoms. The curve on the graph shows that radioactive decay reduces the number of radioactive atoms over time at a predictable rate. Well, that's all we have time for. I know that we covered a lot of information, and I really appreciate you joining me today. I hope that you learned something and that you had fun with the licorice half-life activity. Stay tuned for next month's Pop-Up Science program on November 21st, where we'll learn about weather and make our own weather instruments.